black sky.
Greetings. My name is Dmytro Antoniuk. I am from Kiev, Ukraine. At this very moment, we have alarm air alert, and Russian fighter Mi-31K is in the air, so he theoretically can drop rockets called Kinzhal that can reach any place in Ukraine within few minutes. But this is a reality of this war, and I want to remind you that this is our weekly digest of our materials, of our editorial, Black Sky. I am part of this team. And we will start with an article called Laura Loomer Changes Course. He's part of MAGA turning away from Russia, and it's written by Arthur Jacques. Arthur looks at whether the change in views of well-known conservative commentators show a wider change in Donald Trump's MAGA movement. It focuses on Laura Loomer, who for years opposed U.S. support for Ukraine, but now supports sanctions on Russia and says she was influenced by Russian propaganda. It also discusses a similar change in the views of podcaster Tim Pool, while noting that these examples do not represent the entire MAGA movement. This article explains that Loomer's opinion changed after receiving reports from Ukraine, visiting Kiev and areas near the front line, and meeting Ukrainian officials, including President Volodymyr Zelensky. Seeing the damage caused by Russian attacks and learning more about Russia's close ties with Iran led her to question many of her earlier beliefs. The article also shows that how Ukraine presented its message in a way that would appeal to conservative American audiences. Arthur concludes that although some influential conservative voices have changed their position, it is too early to say that MAGA as a whole has turned away from Russia. The article argues that the real sign of change will be future U.S. decisions on sanctions, military aid, and support for Ukraine, rather than statements made by media personalities. The next one is by Volga Semashko. Kim was left penniless. Who profited from Wildberries? Wildberries, the biggest marketplace company privately owned in Russia. This investigation looks at what happened after Wildberries merged with the Rus Group in 2024. Although Wildberries founder Tatiana Kim officially owned most of the new company, she reportedly lost control over its management and finances. In 2025, the merged company made more than 55 billion rubles in profit, but almost all of it was paid out as dividends. According to the investigation, Kim did not receive the money that her company was expected to get. The article explains that most of the profits went to minority shareholders, including companies with unknown final owners. It also describes possible links between the Rus Group and powerful Kremlin figures, including officials from the Russian presidential administration. The investigation reports claims that these political connections helped protect the company, and many have allowed it to prepare for expected Ukrainian drone attacks by changing its infrastructure insurance policy shortly before these strikes. The final part focuses on the financial problems Wildberries now faces, after repeated Ukrainian attacks on its warehouses. The damage is estimated at hundreds of billions of rubles, while the company has very little money of its own and large debts. According to the article, Wildberries has already asked the Russian government for financial support, and state banks may help the company recover. The third material was written by Svetlana Myalik. The war tore the family apart, and now Bureaucracy, the story of a Ukrainian woman who was unable to obtain temporary protection in Poland. This is an interview, and it tells the story of 27-year-old Oksana Bogdan, who became the guardian of her baby nephew Nazar after a Russian drone strike in Kyiv killed his mother and seriously injured his father. Nazar was born prematurely after an emergency C-section and has spent most of his life in hospitals, undergoing several brain surgeries. Oksana brought him and her 3-year-old son to Poland to escape the war and continue Nazar's treatment. After arriving in Poland, Oksana expected to receive temporary protection and PESEL Ukr number, but a mistake in the border registration system left the family without legal status for several weeks. As a result, they had to pay for Nazar's medical care themselves and could not access many public services. Despite contacting the border authorities and other institutions many times, they had to wait for the problem to be fixed. The interview ends on a positive note, though. After confirmation from the Polish border guard, the mistake was corrected, and Oksana and the children finally received PESEL Ukr status. This article highlights both the serious challenges faced by Ukrainian refugees and the importance of quick cooperation between authorities to help families escaping the war. The next one is done by Vasyl Ilnitsky, The Ukrainian-Russian War, A View from the Inside. It's another interview, and it tells you the story of a Ukrainian soldier whose real identity is hidden for security reasons. Vasyl refers to him as Boris, although this is not his real name. Boris is a 41-year-old soldier from Lysychansk who joined the armed forces of Ukraine in 2019 before the full-scale invasion. While his family was forced to leave their home after the Russian attack, he remained on the front line to defend his country. Boris describes the first days of the full-scale war, the confusion among soldiers, and the fear everyone experienced. He explains that despite the danger, experienced officers helped keep morale high, and many soldiers from eastern Ukraine remained determined to defend Ukraine. He also says that the nature of the war has changed, with drones now playing a major role on the battlefield and making combat much more dangerous. This interview also discusses the current challenges facing the Ukrainian army. Boris believes that many recently mobilized soldiers are not properly prepared for military service, and says that low salaries and corruption make it harder to motivate people to fight. Looking to the future, he hopes to survive the war, reunite with his family, and return to construction work, helping rebuild Ukraine after the war ends. The next one is again by Svetlana Myalik, Sanctions as the Second Front. Can the West deprive Russia of the resources it needs for war? This material explains how sanctions have become an important part of the effort to weaken Russia's ability to continue the war. It looks at new measures introduced by the European Union and proposed in the United States, including tougher secondary sanctions that target countries and companies helping Russia avoid existing restrictions. Um, Svetlana also explains why previous sanctions have not stopped Russia's war machine. Russia has found new trading partners, created ways to bypass restrictions, and continued to produce weapons. This article argues that closing these loopholes and putting pressure on Russia's international partners could make sanctions much more effective. The review also highlights Ukraine's own role in weakening Russia's economy. Alongside international sanctions, Ukrainian strikes on oil facilities, logistic hubs, and other military related targets are described as another way to reduce the resources available for the war. Overall, this article provides a clear overview of the challenges and opportunities in using economic pressure against Russia. And to conclude today's digest, we have another material by Volga Semashko, A Game Left Unfinished. Arkady Dvorkovich has ended his presidency of FIDE early due to European sanctions. This article looks at how EU sanctions have affected Arkady Dvorkovich, the former Russian deputy prime minister and president of the International Chess Federation, FIDE. After being added to the EU sanctions list, Dvorkovich stepped down from his duties and decided not to run for another term as FIDE president. Volga explains that the sanctions were linked to his public support for Russia's actions in occupied Ukrainian territories. The review also explores Dvorkovich's political career, his family's business connections, and his rise to the head of FIDE. It recalls the controversy surrounding his election in 2018, when rivals accused Russia of using political pressure to help secure his victory, as well as questions raised after his re-election in 2022 following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Finally, Volga discusses what Dvorkovich's departure could mean for the future of FIDE. She examines the candidates who may replace him and considers whether Russia will be able to keep its influence over the international chess organization despite growing international pressure. So that was it for this week's digest. My name is Dmytro Antoniuk. I am part of Black Sky team, so feel free at any time to visit our site and to read all these materials entirely. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.